And further, Section 34A of the Act provides that the functions of the Academy shall be to, among other things, establish and manage sports training academies, appreciating that Article 6, subsection 3 of the Constitution provides that a national state organ shall ensure reasonable access to its services in all parts of the Republic. So far as it is appropriate to do, having regard to the nature of the service, this House urges that the government, through the Ministry of Sports, Culture and Arts, to establish sports academies in every constituency. This particular motion has been debated, and what is remaining is for the question to be put so that the members can decide on whether or not they will approve this particular motion. After that particular business, there will be another question which will be put. This time round, it is on the prioritization of recruitment of NYS graduates into the disciplined forces. This particular motion had also been conclusively debated, and it was moved by the Honorable Member Michael Mushira, that aware that the National Youth Service is a government department established by an Act of Parliament whose vision is to catalyze transformative youth empowerment in Kenya. Further aware that the twin purposes of NYS are to create a pool of technical, disciplined and organized human resources to undertake national development programs and to elevate youth unemployment in both formal and informal sectors by providing skills necessary for employment while promoting national cohesion. Further appreciating that NYS currently targets to recruit over 26,000 youth annually through a laid-down procedure where the vacancies in each intake are allocated for every county and gender, acknowledging that the recruits undergo intense 6 months training in paramilitary skills, national reconstruction programs, and disaster response, thus imparting a sense of responsibility, values of discipline, respect to authority, among other skills and values. The member is deeply concerned that after successful completion of the training, the graduate youth are discharged to seek jobs which often are not readily available. Cognizant of the various recruitment procedures, criteria, and budgets allocated for the recruitment and training of servicemen and women in the various disciplined forces in Kenya. This House urges the government, through all the disciplined forces, to consider giving first priority in the recruitment of their servicemen and women to willing NYS graduates with a view of reducing their recruitment costs, training period, and subsequently training posts, and in addition creating jobs for this skilled youth. If you're just joining us, these are live pictures from the National Assembly where the proceedings are about to begin. Deputy Speaker Moses Boy.
Are just short of the required quorum, and therefore I order the bell to be rung.
The Deputy Speaker has invoked Standing Order number 34, which states that a quorum of the House or of a committee of the whole House shall be 50 members if there is not a quorum present when the chair is taken at the time appointed for a meeting of the House, such as this one, immediately after the saying of the prayer. The Speaker shall order the bell to be rung for 10 minutes, and if no quorum is present at the expiration of the 10 minutes, the Speaker may direct that the bell be rung for a further 5 minutes, and if there is still no quorum present, the Speaker shall adjourn.
Now we have quorum, and therefore business will begin.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
This particular one we have, let's start with the Honorable Jeremiah Kioni. We are having a problem locating you, Honorable Kioni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I want to bring to table a public petition on behalf of the good people of Maragua. This petition is on the gazettement or degazettement of some 300 acres of land, forest land, for the economic development of the people of Maragua and to help in unleashing the potential of this area. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to draw the attention of this House to the following petition. That I, Jeremiah Kioni, on behalf of the residents of Maragua constituency, draw the attention of the House to the following. That one of the principles of land policy, as enshrined under Article 60 of the Constitution of Kenya, 2010, is that land be used and managed in accordance with the principles of sustainable and productive management of land resources and sound conservation and protection of the ecologically sensitive areas. That forest land vests in the national government, which holds it in trust for the people of Kenya, but administered by the National Land Commission. That Forest Conservation and Management Act of 2016 confers power to Parliament to vary boundaries and all revoke public forests. That part of Maragua Township, which serves as the headquarters and economic hub of Nyandarua North Sub-County, was developed within the gazetted forest area before the Act came into effect. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that Maragua was officially opened in 1947, and it was then called the Maragua African Welfare Center. Mr. Speaker, sir, that Maragua Police Station was set up in 1948 within that area, and in 1948, Sir Evelyn Barin opened the now Maragua Dispensary. Went further to give some 27,000 shillings for the construction of Maragua Social Hall. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that on the 25th of May, 1967, the first town plans were developed and passed and approved by the Commissioner of Lands on the 1st of July, 1967. The first independence celebrations in 1963 for that whole region were also held within that area of Maragua, and a DO posted there. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that in 1997, the then President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, directed that Maragua be given an extra 300 acres so that it could be developed and harness the potential of that area. The process was started, but Mr. Speaker, sir, that was not completed and before its completion, the Act of 2016, the Conservation and Management Act 2016 came into effect. Regrettably, the area cannot have a high economic potential and a maximum economic benefit. And for this to be attained, because of this gazettement of the area as a forest land. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say that as a result of the gazettement, the title deeds cannot be issued to developers.
Honorable Kioni, I am convinced that you are actually debating.
No, I am just doing the presentation, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Yeah, because I've really got what you've been doing in very great detail.
Yes.
That you could actually, when I now send it to the committee, I do not know what you will actually go and do in the committee yourself. So please make it
I will do that, brief. Mr. Speaker. Thank you. That as a result of the gazettement, Mr. Speaker, sir, title deeds cannot be issued to developers whose property is within the gazetted area without Parliament's approval of gazetting the said developed area, and that the matter presented to this petition, in this petition, is not pending before any court, constitutional court, or any legal body. Therefore, your humble petition has played
Let's see first on this particular one, 2 members, and then I'll give 2 members on the second one. Let's start with this one. Members who are interested to speak on this one, let's see if you place yourself on the intervention. I see Honorable, there are now many. Honorable Mbadi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, even though I have no much information about this forest, and I think the representative of that area is well placed to address the issues of concern to his constituents, and I'm sure that it is for the benefit of his constituents that he has brought this motion, although, again, as a National Assembly would be reluctant to gazette forest, but if there is need, actually the law allows this House to gazette, to approve gazettement and gazettement, so it can happen. As the committee looks into it, my concern is that the Department of Forestry really.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also I rise to support my colleague. And even as I support Mr. Speaker, I know the matters forests are very sensitive in this country. And Mr. Speaker, there are situations whereby a land was actually given out a long time ago, and still, when you look at the records, it portrays the same places as a forest. So in that view, Mr. Speaker, I think the committee need to really look at that particular issue, and if need be, I know, as he is putting it, the presenter, the economic impact to the people of Maragua is equally important as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Let's go to the next one. Honorable Didmas Barasa.
Honorable Speaker, I, the undersigned, on behalf of the families of the late Peter Wanyama Wanyonyi and Edward Barasa, both residents of Kimilili constituency, draw the attention of the House on the following. That the late Peter Wanyama Wanyonyi and Edward Barasa, a businessman from Kimilili constituency, were murdered in cold blood, who never took any action to otherwise deter the heinous acts. That the families of the deceased have been subjected to untold suffering since then. That the government called on police to speed up investigations into the 2 cases, but the report of the investigations into the matter had never been shared with the deceased families to date, and that the matter presented in this petition is not pending before any tribunal, court of law, or a constitutional body. Therefore, your humble petitioners pray that the National Assembly, through the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security, 1, investigates and establish the cause of the 2 murders with a view to prosecute the culprits. It investigates and recommends for the necessary action against negligence of duty by the National Police Service on the matter, and make any other order or direction that is deemed fit in the circumstances of the case, and your petitioners will ever pray. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Two members will also speak to this, Honorable Wamalwa of Kiminini.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, indeed, I want to support this particular petition. Mr. Speaker, my originated in Kimilili, where Honorable Didmas is my MP when I go home, and before we moved to Trans Nzoia. And I'm aware of Peter Wanyama, who was an advocate of the High Court, Mr. Speaker. And that particular time when we went to Bari, we were told the police will leave no stone unturned. It is now years, Mr. Speaker. I think it's the highest time that we must call upon the National Police Service to be able to act within a specific time frame. As and that's why, Mr. Speaker, last time we said, for us to oversight the police, we should give enough funding to IPOA, because police, you know, you have no one to oversight them, because they're the ones who do the investigation, Mr. Speaker. In fact, recently, when we had many rock CSs who were violating the court orders, contempt of court, we were wondering how police will go and someone like Matiangi, last time when he missed to come for this parliamentary summons that was given. So it is important, police service must also be oversighted, and that's why we must strengthen IPOA. I thank you, and we support, and we call upon the committee that is relevant, headed by Honorable Major Waluke, to move with speed so that you can bring some way forward. Thank you.
What's your point of order, Leader of Majority?
Mr. Speaker, I have said many times this House is a house that you only make statements of fact. And to my knowledge as a
one, because he has pressed, made a request.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me also take this opportunity to air my views on this, Mr. Speaker. I knew Mr. Wanyama as one of our lawyers in Bungoma who was murdered during a by-election of Muskari Kombo and Senator Wetangula, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm on Security Committee, National Administration and Security Committee as Vice Chair. My chair is Honorable Paul Koinange. And I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, this matter, they are apprehended, Mr. Speaker. So thank you very much for giving me a chance.
And therefore, the two petitions are committed to the relevant committees. The first one to the Committee on Lands, and the second, Committee on Administration and National Security. Next order.
Order number 5, papers.
On this particular one, we have Honorable Gideon Keter. Huh? Oh, sorry. This is not order number 6. Order number 5. So, Honorable Commander, I remember I approved your...
and the governance program.
Use the next one, Honorable Commander. It doesn't seem to be coming out clearly.
Held in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia from 12 to 16 March 2018.
Let's start from the beginning, Honorable. You know, previously you are not... Previously you are not very clear, so,
Speaker,
so that you go on record.
To read the following paper on the table of this House today. Wednesday, July 4th, 2018, the report on the Alaskan Committee delegation to executive leadership and the governance program held in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, from 12 to 16
March 2018.
Very well. Thank you very much. Let's go to the next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Yes, on this one, Honorable Keter.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following motion: that aware of the economic, health, social, and cultural benefit of sports, further aware that Section 4 of the Sports Act 2013 provides the functions of Sports Kenya, which include, among others, the establishment, management, development, and maintenance of the sport facility, stadium. This House urges the national government to establish a national rugby union stadium in the country and a high-performing center of excellence in every region, with a view to provide quality sporting infrastructure, promoting the sport, and providing facilities where talent scouted can be nurtured.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 7, statements. Order number 8, motion, establishment of sports academies in every constituency.
On this particular one, it had been finalized. What remained was a question to be put, but only to encourage members to be, to be only moving motions and placing motions that are very brief and concise. It's a fairly long. In many disciplines remain low due to, among other things, inadequate investment, scouting, and nurturing of talent, cognizant that Section 33(4) of the Sports Act 2013 establishes the Kenya Academy of Sports, and further, Section 34A of the Act provides that functions of the Academy shall be have it. Next order.
Order number 9, motion, prioritizing recruitment of NYS graduates into the disciplined forces. Question to be put.
Again, what remained on this was for the question to be put. Order, Honorable Cheptumo. You are in your third term now, Honorable Cheptumo. You know the effect. But this one is even longer. Necessary for employment while promoting national cohesion. Further, appreciating that NYS currently targets to recruit over 26,000 youths annually through a laid down procedure where vacancies in each intake are allocated for every county and gender, acknowledging that the recruits undergo intense 6 months training in paramilitary skills, national reconstruction programs, and disaster response, thus imparting a sense of responsibility, value of discipline, respect to authority, among other skills and values. Deeply concerns that after the successful completion of the training, the graduate youth are discharged to seek jobs which are often not readily available, cognizance of the various recruitment procedures, criteria, and budgets allocated to the recruitment and training of service.
Speaker, I think it's for this House to be cognizant of the fact that this House cannot act in vain. This House cannot use its precious time to debate and ultimately you put a question to something that cannot be implemented by the Committee of Implementation. Every night, the House Business Committee, every Tuesday, we are approving motions that says urges. Speaker, I think we can use this time better. Members can look at existing principal acts in law, parliamentary legislation, and go and amend that act, if it is Health Act, if it's not, we discuss more of private members' bills on Wednesday morning, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, if we have to discuss a motion, I think we don't want to turn the House into a talk show. Speaker, the time is very important. So I have looked at all the bills we have done in the 11th Parliament.
Let's have Honorable Kingola first. I see Honorable Kingola wants to say something. Maybe I'll give a few more members on this particular one because it's probably a serious one, and in any case, this is a Wednesday morning, which is reserved to making, you know, private members' motions succeed. Yes, proceed, Honorable Kingola, Macau. Kingola, Macau.
Sorry. Hello.
Yep.
Oh,
I'll give you the next one. Let's see if it is working.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But with a lot of respect, Mr. Speaker, for the Honorable Leader Majority. Mr. Speaker, aware that the Leader Majority has been here for more than 2 terms now. Mr. Speaker, discourage new members of Parliament in this House to bring in motions, and yet he sits in the House Business Committee, and they're the ones who admit these motions to come into this House, Mr. Speaker.
Actually, Honorable Kingola, you are the one who is out of order. Because what the Leader of Majority has done is not in any way to discourage any member. What is actually done is to improve the capacity of the members to achieve that which they bring before the House. So I think you have...
I stand guided. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So, well, but you've been heard anyway, you know. So let me give a Honorable... I'm trying to look at for members who have not spoken in this particular one. Well, that becomes... Now, this is a problem here. Let's have a Honorable Wamalwa, because you are top on the list anyway, so unfortunately I have to give you, and yet you have spoken before.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For Honorable the Chair of Implementation to implement this. In the last Parliament, Mr. Speaker, the current Deputy Temporary Speaker, Honorable, the gracious Honorable MP for Narok County, she was the chair. To become a university and to be renamed Wamala Kijana University of Science and Technology. I followed about this, it has been upgraded, and the name has not been changed, Mr. Speaker. So the Committee of Implementation, Honorable Kenta, maybe it's the highest time we should follow up, so that Parliament cannot legislate in vain. There's legislation.
These motions may not be really implementable, and the chair for the Committee on Implementation is here. But, Mr. Speaker, the problem is, if you look at all motions, those of us who have been in the last Parliament, especially 9th and 10th Parliament, this was the most lively, very, important sessions, Wednesday mornings, that no one would like to really miss. Because, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Leader of Majority that for these motions really to be, to make or to have any impact, we have to resolve as a House. But look at all these motions, even the ones that you have put on the question right now, they all have financial implications. Comply with Article 114, where the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury need to be brought on board, and also satisfies Article 95 of the Constitution, where we are the people's representative, for us to be, not to be passing motions in vain, to be passing motions that are...
Majority.
It's for the season, Mr. Speaker.
No. Mr. Speaker, this member should not even have the mic. He's dressed in a winter jacket. No, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, this member, and he's part of the leadership. Speaker, you should throw him out, and he goes back to...
Mr. Speaker, my chest.
You are now okay, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I
That is
wanted
a
to advise.
bulletproof quote. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to advise this, that if looking at a lot of the motions that are brought to this House, many times you notice that some of these motions could actually be amendments to existing laws and regulations that our fully and properly well-staffed table office could consider before even drafting the motions. They assist members to identify the
You are completely, you are actually out of order. You are out of order.
Nasalimu amri Mheshimiwa Speaker.
You are out of order. You know how, proceed, but you are out of order. You cannot, I do not think there is any counting. There you are, there you are.
Mr. Speaker, it's only in order for me to stand because my name was mentioned.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate and I respect Honorable Sarah Korele, having been near the last parliament, courtesy to one honorable former speaker of this.
Na tuangalia yale yote ambayo tunanena bunge hii. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, haitakuwa jambo la busara kwamba sisi tutamka asubuhi alfajiri kuja hapa tu kuzungumza maneno ambayo hayatafika pahali popote. Napotia tamati Mheshimiwa Spika ni kwamba unajua yale nilianena mimi nimesalimu amri yako na nimeomba msamaha, lakini Mheshimiwa Spika
Wednesday, we've not had private members' bills. We've only been having private members' motions, and the motions which are urging. And these are not going to be effective, Mr. Speaker. So I want to ask to resolve.
Clear that we are not discussing the motion that has gone, that the question has been put.
No.
We are discussing motions generally. Yes. I mean, what we expect in future, because the standing order is very clear. We cannot be discussing anything that a question has been put. That is a matter under the a bridge. But so I'm just trying to,
the message to have the relief on what the member is claiming. Mr. Speaker, also, the notice of motion should show the remedy. But as per the standing order, Mr. Speaker, the question I bring to this parliament is this, on this issue. We as members, you say we are new members, bringing that we are urging. Do we bring this motion direct here? This motion always they go through the table office, and do we bring it?
Let's see, Honorable Member Fondiwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As first-time members, we have been agonized on these issues because sometimes motions are brought here and members say that one was on the 12th Parliament, the other one was 11th Parliament. It means then we may
have a list of all motions that have been brought to this House and not implemented, Mr. Speaker. I support the leader of majority on this. Thank you.
Since this is as a result of the notice you gave, let's hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I only have 2 comments to make regarding this, especially to the House Business Committee. I believe when you sit and agree what should come on the order paper, you should consider also the language that has been used. And for the language that has been used, I believe the House knows that we have a draft team or department in the building that actually we give the intention, and before we resolve, I believe we have to bring it to the House first. Then the House looks at it, and then as a House we resolve. That's what I believe.
Actually, Honorable Keteri, you are perfectly right. It's good also for members to understand that the nature of motions are supposed to be of a persuasive nature. Now, if you want to really have a much stronger way of dealing with some of these things, probably you need to also look at the standing orders and put the necessary amendments. So that you shouldn't have a problem with the word urging, because if it's something is supposed to be persuasive, then really you need to urge. If you really want to go beyond that and make something that will be, will have more substance, it probably will be amending specific acts and bringing bills. So members should also be clear. So members, you must look at both sides of the coin. Now, I think that should maybe, because I see so many members want to speak on this particular one, and you are eating into the, let's see, Honorable Chair Cheptumo, and then I will give a lady member, and then I'll go to Honorable Kenta. And that will be it. That will be it. And anybody who will put your hand up, I will take punitive actions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be very brief, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to support the sentiments raised by the majority leader, and indeed supported by members. Mr. Speaker, let me read Article 95, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution. The National Assembly represents the people of the constituencies and specific interests in the National Assembly. Sub-Article 2, the National Assembly deliberates on and resolves on issues of concern of the people. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to really agree that this issue where we don't have the authority to resolve as a House and direct ministries or departments, Mr. Speaker, to do what this House wants to be done, is, Mr. Speaker, we are denying ourselves the power to really execute our function under Article 95 of the Constitution. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think it is very important. I was in the last House committee, the House Business Committee in the last Parliament. And Mr. Speaker,
you have taken more than the 1 minute.
I'm finishing.
So
and I think, Mr. Speaker, we want to challenge the House Business Committee, Mr. Speaker, to guide the House on this particular issue. And so, Mr. Speaker, I support, and I think we should be able to arise and take our position and be able to resolve as a House for the government to implement what we agree to do.
Now I'm trying to look out for a lady member, but you know the interventions are...
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, this
you gave yourself the floor, and which is wrong, but I can regularize it by giving it to you now. But next time, that will not be allowed. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just looking at the motions that we have here, and they are all urging the House. And Honorable Speaker, this being a House of Records, we do not just bring documents on the floor. They have to be properly advised. We go through room 8. They make sure that they make corrections. And that is table office. So, Honorable Speaker, if a motion says resolves, it will not pass. So this is not a matter that can be, we can discuss here. And Honorable Speaker, people have a lot of hope in what is said in this House. In fact, the people that we represent do not know that they think that everything that we say here must be implemented. So I would like to support the Leader of Majority that this is a matter that needs to be handled by House Business Committee. I was in that committee in the 11th Parliament, and I believe that this committee has the power to, 1, make a decision, and 2, even go beyond and sieve through the motions and advise to make sure that we do not just talk in vain. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join my colleagues.
And I'm giving you in your capacity as a chair.
Yes.
The relevant committee.
You, Mr. Speaker. So I'd like to join my colleagues by supporting the Leader of Majority. In fact, Mr. Speaker, as we are talking now, we are working on the report to present to Parliament. And to be honest to this House, we have got hundreds of motions, of petitions that are still pending to date. Mr. Speaker, we have got a lot of challenges, especially in regard to the framing of the motions. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, people have appeared before us, CSS, PSS, and all those others. And the issue is, they always tell us, Motion say government does that. Who is government? Because I believe there is a CS, there is somebody else who is supposed to take responsibility. So even the framing of who is supposed to be responsible is a problem. So in fact, it is upon us as a house to put everything in a way that is going to be implementable. Mr. Speaker, we have also had the issue of budgetary implications. Because we'll say, we'll pass this motion. We'll shout here and there. But when it goes to the implementing agencies, they are unable to do so because they do not have the budget. In fact, most of the time they come and say, we want to do it, we are willing to do it, but where is the money? So I think we should also be very careful about what we pass so that we do not act in vain. In fact, when the public out there listens to us, sees us, saying that this will be done at a particular place, this will be done for the whole country, and then it's not done because of the finances, they do not understand that it's not the fault of Parliament. They do not understand that it's not the fault of Parliament. So I think while we pass all these resolutions, even the clear ones, we must be very sure that there is budgetary support. Okay. Just the last thing. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to urge the members. There are hundreds of motions pending. Can you please approach the committee and let us know, like Honorable Omar has been doing it, and we are following his motion relentlessly. So if any member has an interest in a particular motion, please approach us, because it is difficult for us to pick a particular motion unless the member also follows. But I will add only one thing, Mr. Speaker, sir. In fact, this committee is supposed to be supported by all committees. And we are finding this committee, it's treated as if it is an inferior committee. And in fact, I'm complaining because we don't even have a lady member, not even a single one. This is the only committee which is comprised of male members of Parliament.
You want lady members in your committee?
We want some ladies there because we need...
I understand,
yes, yes, it's very important because why there are issues...
No, I understand you.
There are issues that touch on women. We do not have even a single one. So I'd like to request my colleagues, please, this is a very important committee. Sacrifice and join us. Even if we have two of them, we'll be very happy.
Take some of these things to the liaison committee.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you so much, and I really appreciate what the leader of majority has said. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, honorable members, let's move to the next order. And before we move to the next order, honorable members, let me recognize in the public gallery pupils from Alba School, Gishugu constituency of Kirinyaga County. We also have pupils and students from Rubiru School, Gatanga of Muranga County. In the speakers gallery, we have Holy Cross Academy from Dagoretti North constituency, Nairobi County, and also pupils from St. Peter's Nyamesocho from Bamachoge Borabu, Kisii County. Okay, next order.
Order number 10, protection of Kenyan territories.
Yes, let's hear you, Honorable Mbadi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that aware that Lake Victoria, the largest freshwater lake in Kenya, is located in 3 East African countries, further aware that the islands of Migingo, Remba, Sigulu, and Kiwa, among others, in the surrounding waters of the lake are located within Kenyan borders, recognizing the progress made in the East African community integration process in deepening and widening the integration process, including ensuring border communities are sensitized on these matters, cognizant of the fact that Kenyans living along the borders, including fisherfolk and pastoral communities, have continuously suffered from external threats through harassment, raids, and arbitrary arrests, with even those operating in economic zones not immune to such threats. Cognizant of the fact that the provisions of Articles 238.1, 239, and 241.3a of the Constitution stipulate that national security involves the protection of Kenya's territorial integrity and sovereignty, its people, their rights and national interests against internal and external threats, deeply concerned that Kenyans, especially those around Lake Victoria, the Indian Ocean and other border areas, continue to face harassment and displacement by persons from neighboring countries, this House resolves that the government exercises its power to protect Kenyans from harassment by external threats and takes adequate measures to ensure that Kenyan territorial integrity is guaranteed and safeguarded. Mr. Speaker, I would like to start by saying that the issue or controversies are surrounding the ownership of islands in Lake Victoria, more particularly, and the one that I think many Kenyans are more conversant with, it's Migingo Island, has taken such a long time. But Mr. Speaker, this controversy reached the fever pitch, or rather the boiling point, in 2009. I remember on 12th and 13th of March 2009, Mr. Speaker, a delegation from this country led by the then Foreign Affairs Minister, the Honorable Moses Wetangula, together with his counterpart in Land Ministry then, the Honorable James Orengo, led a delegation of Kenyans to Uganda, and in that delegation were two members of parliament, the immediate former member of parliament for Nyatike, D. Kanyanga, and myself, who's representing the same constituency but a different name, Gwasi constituency. We also had a number of technical people, support people from the survey, from the Ministry of Lands and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, just to see and try to resolve the issue of the border between Kenya and Uganda. But Mr. Speaker, I want to inform this House and those who are listening to me that if there are people out there who are doubting where or the location of the island of Migingo, whether it is in Uganda or in Kenya, I would like to be very clear that when we were in Uganda, actually looking at the Uganda Constitution, not even Kenyan Constitution, the Ugandan Constitution has defined the Uganda bound, the territory of Uganda. And regarding the islands in Lake Victoria, that constitution is very clear. It says that the boundary of Uganda starts from the tip of what they call the Pyramid Islands. Mr. Speaker, those are wordings from the constitution of that country and runs northerly. And clearly, when we sat down with the team from Uganda and you draw it on the map, it was very clear that both Migingo and what is called Ugingo Islands are both in Kenya. And when the team from Uganda realized that, Mr. Speaker, quickly they changed their mind and the narrative and said that we don't want to debate much. Let us just set a team in place which is going to demarcate the boundary between Kenya and Uganda after the survey. And Mr. Speaker, remember that time we went ahead, the government went ahead and put a team in place and a budget was allocated to make sure that the boundary between Kenya and Uganda is made clear. But Mr. Speaker, up to now, the matter is not yet resolved completely. And the government seems to have gone back to now not take this matter so seriously as it was taken then. What has happened since then, Mr. Speaker, is that Kenyans, especially the fishermen and women, the fisherfolk, the fishing community, those who go into the lake to fish and within our waters, have faced continuous harassment by foreign forces. And I don't want to restrict it to Uganda alone. Even our neighbors, Tanzania, we have had issues with them regarding where is the boundary between Kenya and Tanzania. But the most prominent is that between Kenya and Uganda. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, Migingo Island is clearly in Kenya, and everybody, including Ugandans themselves, in fact, none other than the president of Uganda, came out clearly to say that the island is in Kenya, but water is in Uganda. Whatever that means, I don't know. But from his wording, it is clear that the island which we call Migingo is in Kenya. But you still find that Uganda's security forces are stationed on that island. This is the only country which has allowed, I think, in the whole world, probably, maybe with the exception of a few in the Middle East, where the American forces sometimes at will moves there and other maybe Western forces, but the only sovereign country which respects its territorial integrity, which has allowed the foreign security agencies to be stationed in its country is only Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, if these, because Ugandans are our brothers, but and even Tanzanians are our brothers, if these security forces were stationed in these islands,
but peacefully coexisting with our people, then there would be no problem. But, Mr. Speaker, just a few weeks ago, and I'm sure the MP for Bondo will speak to this, in an island in Bondo constituency, the Uganda security officers came and arrested 7 Kenyans, 3 of them police officers. And what these Kenyans went through in the hands of Uganda security forces is something that is traumatizing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they later released the police officers, but still detained the 4 fishermen who were arrested in the island. I'm not even sure up to now whether those 4 Kenyans have been released. What mistake have these Kenyans committed? These Kenyans have committed the mistake of fishing within Kenyan territory. The question that those of us who depend on fishing as our source of livelihood keep on asking is, can we be told clearly and categorically whether Kenya has surrendered part of its territory to another country or not? And this is a question that we have been asking many times. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I felt it was important under Article 95 of the Constitution, this National Assembly has a responsibility. The responsibility we have, Mr. Speaker, is to resolve issues, deliberate on and resolve issues that are of concern to the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, the people who live near Lake Victoria, the Kenyans who live near Lake Victoria, who are suffering in the hands of these foreign forces, are the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, we have a responsibility as a nation. This is not even a matter that should be considered a regional matter. It is a matter that covers the whole country. It is about our pride as a country. No country in the world would allow any foreign force to torture, frustrate, harass its own citizens. Mr. Speaker, when you look at Article 238 of the Constitution, talking about our national security, it is clear that the national security is a protection against internal and external threats to Kenya's territorial integrity and sovereignty, its people, their rights, freedoms, property, peace, stability, and prosperity, and other national interests. Mr. Speaker, I would tell you that Kenyans, I represent Kenyans who fish in these islands, around these islands. I represent Kenyans who live in these islands. There is no peace. There is no prosperity. There is no stability. Mr. Speaker, there are no freedoms. Some of our fishermen are even being forced to eat raw fish as a punishment. Mr. Speaker, yet our Constitution is very clear that human beings must be treated with dignity. That is one cardinal right that we enjoy as a country. That is not debatable. And you have Kenyans being tortured within Kenya by foreign forces. Mr. Speaker, yet we pay taxes. We pay taxes to protect ourselves. In fact, one of the reasons, Mr. Speaker, why governments were formed, the early governments, the initial government, why people decided to form themselves in the government is to protect themselves. That was the cardinal, the most important reason why governments exist. If you cannot protect, if government cannot protect you, then you have no business having a government. People pay taxes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have our national security organs. We have the Kenya Defense Forces. We have the National Intelligence Service. We have the National Police Service. These organs of the state, these our security organs is supposed to help protect Kenyans. When these foreign forces come into Kenya, where is our National Intelligence Service? What advice is it giving to the government in terms of protecting our territory? When these foreign forces come into Kenya, why would we have our foreign forces helping Somali to stabilize, and you cannot help people around Migingo, around Kiwailand, around Mfangano? There is a lot of insecurity. I'm sure the MP for Suba North will speak to it. There's a lot of insecurity in Mfangano Island, right inside Kenya, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mfangano Island, you don't even have to go close to Lake Victoria to see. You don't even have to move close to Lake Victoria to see Kiwa Island. Yet, people who come from another country, which is far off, bring their security forces to torture and frustrate our people. Mr. Speaker, this is demeaning, and Mr. Speaker, I would want to urge this time using urge positively, urge the committee of this House, the committee that is supposed to be in charge of implementation, but more importantly, the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee. There is need to quickly take this matter up, call the cabinet secretary responsible to answer to questions why there is laxity. Mr. Speaker, even the Indian Ocean has similar problems. I have a question that was drafted by a member of parliament from Turkana. Mr. Speaker, again, in this one, it's even painful that the people who are harassing the fishing community there are actually our wildlife services, the Kenya Wildlife Services. But, Mr. Speaker, getting back to the issues that I've raised, I want to ask this House to speak and pronounce itself in anger, Mr. Speaker. There was a time I spoke here in 2009, and I said that a president, I don't want to mention him by name, because I know there will be issues of standing order, although I'm not so sure where someone keeps on invading your territory, whether that still qualifies to be termed as a friendly country. But I said that there is a president from a neighboring country who is used to dictatorial tendencies. And this president wants to export that dictatorial tendency to our country. Mr. Speaker, this is something that could not be accepted in a civilized society. You may be weak, but someone cannot push you up to the kitchen of your bedroom. Even if you are a weak person, you must look for where you kept a panga and slash that person. And Mr. Speaker, where it has reached, I would tell you, if you took your time, Mr. Speaker, any member who can take his time or her time to talk and have a discussion with the fishing community around Lake Victoria, they would tell you that it is just because of poverty. That is why they still continue going into the lake. Otherwise, they would not. Mr. Speaker, it is so frustrating. I will tell you that one thing that is very annoying is that even there is no power in most of these islands. And still, when some other organizations volunteer and offer to provide power to some of the islands, then you find our government criminalizing the provision of that power. Instead of making it work better, they are criminalizing. So the question that our people ask is, what crime did we commit in this country? Are we in this country by mistake? All of us came from somewhere. And if we are here by mistake, someone needs to tell us where we need to go to. But Mr. Speaker would tell you for a fact that we are here by choice, and we are here to stay. And our people must be protected. So the government must act with speed. This is not something to wait. They must act with speed and ensure that this continuous harassment of our people come to a stop. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I can see my time is up. I want to ask, in the spirit of nationality, because we have other representatives from, I don't want it to appear like a regional issue. I want to ask the MP, Honorable Dan Manzo, to second my motion, and I'm sure my other colleagues will also find time, who have a lot of information about this harassment. Will have time. Honorable MP for Nyatika is there. Opio Wendai is there. Of course, I spoke about Mili. I can see the MP for Karachuonyo. I cannot mention all of them. I know they all have an interest in it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I move.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Manzo, second, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to second this very, very important motion. Mr. Speaker, the facts have been relayed by the Honorable Bandi, and the crux of the matter is that, Mr. Speaker, although the government put up a budget to make sure that this area is surveyed and marketed, there has been good meetings between the two countries. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that from the initial information and from the agreement between the two countries involved, that Migingo Islands is in the territory of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. And not only Migingo Island, but other islands. The truth of the matter is that the Kenyan government does not have the navy in Lake Victoria, while the Ugandan government has their navy in Lake Victoria. And a lot of times, even for resources, and out of our friendship with them, they even fuel their boats on the Kenyan side, and at times table stand, and our own fishermen who are, earning a living and looking for food for their children and for money to pay the children's school fees, end up arrested by foreign forces. Mr. Speaker, the moment you are arrested by a foreign force, then it means you have to be taken to court in another country, Mr. Speaker. When they are arrested, they are not brought to court in the Kenyan territory. They are taken to court in another country. What happens there, Mr. Speaker, means then that family has to look for a lawyer, and a lot of times these fishermen go unrepresented. And therefore, even a lot of times, it's not clear what eventually happens with those cases. But the truth of the matter is these people are away from their country and they are away from their families for a long time on a matter whereby it's clear that there is no offense at all, but nevertheless they are still arrested. And a lot of times they are just taken around, tortured, and eventually released far away from where they were found in the territory of the country. Now that the border is clear, Mr. Speaker, it is only fair that this matter be finalized once and for all, that the two countries do engage, the two ministers in charge of foreign affairs do engage, so that the matter, and maybe also a lot of times when we are doing the Eastern African briefings, and when there are Eastern African meetings, Mr. Speaker, then also this is a matter which should come up so that it is resolved once and forever. And Mr. Speaker, it is true, if a Kenyan, for real and truly, is in another territory, then they have a right to make arrests. But when a Kenyan is fishing and working on the Kenyan side, on Migingo Island, there is no reason at all, Mr. Speaker, to arrest this Kenyan and prosecute them for a non-existing offense in a foreign country, Mr. Speaker, or detaining them and eventually releasing them to go back home only after torture and without any compensation or their time having been wasted. And it be a matter involving another country. It just ends at that, Mr. Speaker. So I believe this motion is very important so that we can be able to protect our territory as it is required by the Constitution. It is required by the laws of this country. There be good political will. The ministry involved, the Ministry of Interior, such that our own policemen are being arrested and subsequently released is not fair, Mr. Speaker. So that, Mr. Speaker, we move as a nation, we protect our borders, not only in Migingo Island, not only Lake Victoria, but also on any other front, Mr. Speaker. And for that matter, Mr. Speaker, I beg to second.
Well, honorable members, I will propose a question, which is that aware that Lake Victoria, the largest freshwater lake in Kenya, is located in 3 East African countries. Further aware that the islands of Migingo, Reba, Siguru, and Kiwa, among others in the surrounding waters of the lake, are located within the Kenyan borders. Recognizing the progress made in the East African community integration process in deepening and widening the integration process, including ensuring border communities are sensitized on these matters. Cognizance of the fact that Kenyans living along the borders, including the fisher folk and pastoral communities, have continuously suffered from external threats through harassment, raids, and arbitrary arrests, with even those operating in economic zones not immune to such threats. Cognizance of the fact that the provisions of Article 238(1), 239, and 241(3)(a) of the Constitution stipulate that the national security involves the protection of Kenya's territorial integrity and sovereignty, its people, their rights, and national interests against internal and external threats. Deeply concerned that Kenyans, especially those around Lake Victoria, the Indian Ocean, and other border areas continue to face harassment and displacement by persons from neighboring countries. This House resolves that the government exercises its power to protect Kenyans from harassment by external threats and takes adequate measures to ensure that Kenya territorial integrity is guaranteed and safeguarded. Very well, honorable members, I will be very well be guided by the manner in which members have registered interest to contribute. But let me start with Honorable Miri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment, a proposed amendment to the motion. Mr. Speaker, I move that the motion be amended by adding the following words: Ringiti, Mfangano, after the word Remba in line 3, and further adding the words, including through the establishment of a naval force to man the Lake Victoria waters, at the end of the motion. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I'm moving this amendment is to include 2 of the islands in my constituency, Ringiti and Mfangano, that are closest also. Remba, that has been mentioned by the mover of the motion, is the one that is closest to Uganda. But I also have Ringiti and Mfangano Islands that are also neighboring Uganda and Tanzania, Mr. Speaker. And are also always subject to harassment by Ugandan forces. I have 7 habitable islands, but the 3 that are closest to Uganda and Tanzania are Remba, Ringiti, and Mfangano. And Mr. Speaker, the reason I want to add them by name is that at some point I was in my own constituency in Rusinga Island, which is now annexed to the mainland through the bridge that the president launched. It's no longer really an island. But while I was in Rusinga Island, I was informed that there were Ugandan forces in a beach called Litare within Rusinga Island. And Mr. Speaker, when I went there, fortunately, it turned out, and we arrested these forces. The Kenyan police arrested the forces. Fortunately, on this instant, it turned out it was Kenyan policemen masquerading as Ugandan officers and stealing from the fishermen. And we arrested them, and we let them go, but it just tells you how difficult our fishermen are operating, because the Kenyan police know that there is nobody manning the lake. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I am also including the naval forces, Mr. Speaker, because the police alone cannot man this situation. Only last week on Wednesday, I think, Mr. Speaker, I was in Remba Island. I missed Parliament to attend a very high-level security meeting by the entire county security team, led by the county commissioner, and included the entire, I can't mention all of them, but county and sub-county security team, because of harassment of fishermen by Ugandan forces. Mr. Speaker, I want to just read for you what is called the Busia Declaration, to tell you that we are no longer really in Kenya. I know that as the Abasuba community, our origin is Uganda, the Kabaka kingdom. In fact, the Abasuba come from the kingdom itself. He was a brother to the king, who fought the king and was banished to Kenya. So maybe that could also be a political reason that we are being attacked from historical reasons. But Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, I know that my time is up, but with your indulgence, this is utterly important. Would I request that I be given a little time just to read this declaration?
Honourable, you are just moving the amendment, and I'm sure possibly you'll get space to contribute to the mother or the parent motion, and I'm sure there will be a window. On this one, you're just dealing with the amendment, so if we could restrict it to that. Yeah, of course. So let's move that way. Honourable Miri, your opportunity to speak to the parent motion is still there. So
I stand guided, Mr. Speaker. I will therefore move the amendment and I request, I don't want to urge, there are too many urges, and request my sister, Honorable Barrett, to second the amendment.
Please.
And I urge, because I think the country needs to know what we are dealing with. I need to read the Busia Declaration to know what our fishermen are going through. Thank you.
Very well. You have the floor. Second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me this opportunity. I want to stand here and support the amendment that the two islands, second the amendment that the two islands, Mfangano and Ringiti, be included in the list of the others that already are in the motion. Thank you. And of course, the naval supervision or patrol is necessary in the island. Thank you.
You second. Very well, honorable members, just to, so then we tidy up that, we dispense with the amendment. Propose a motion that the motion be amended by adding the following words, Rigiti, Mfangano, after the word Reba in line 3, and further adding the words, including through the establishment of a naval force to man the Lake Victoria waters at the end of the motion. Yes, that, very well. Is that the spirit and the mood of the House? Very well. Honorable members, I will put the question that the motion be amended by adding the following words, Rigiti Mfangano, after the word Reba in line 3, and further adding the words, including through the establishment of a naval force to man the Lake Victoria waters at the end of the motion. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable members, now we'll go to the main motion with now the amendment part of it. Very well. Yes, even on the... Okay. So, even on the right, you don't need to remind me. You'll still get a chance, as much as the left will. We'll start with Honorable Wadai Opio, member for Uguja.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've been eagerly waiting to get this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, firstly, I want to thank the Honorable John Mbadi, the leader of minority, for introducing this very critical motion. Mr. Speaker, I want from the outset to support the motion as amended in its entirety. Mr. Speaker, as I do so, I must acknowledge the fact that Honorable Mbadi has been a little bit diplomatic. Honorable Mbadi has coached his motion in a lot of diplomatic language. But we must be able to call a spade, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are talking of a situation, if I restrict myself just to Migingo. I know the other islands have similar problems, but I want to speak about Migingo Island. So, Speaker, we have a situation in Migingo Island where Kenyan citizens, principally originating from the Luo community, are under constant attack and humiliation by forces coming from a foreign country. Mr. Speaker, as Honorable Mbadi said it earlier, that is something that is unheard of. Mr. Speaker, if this country were America or Israel, for example, such an act of aggression by a country purporting to be a friendly neighbor would attract serious reprisals, would attract serious counterattack. But we are talking about a country that has chosen to sit meekly, to sit back and watch as forces from a neighboring country continue to denigrate its own citizens. Mr. Speaker, the cardinal responsibility of every sovereign state is to protect its territorial integrity, rather than protecting the lives and property of its citizens. A sovereign state has got a cardinal responsibility to protect jealously its territorial integrity. The Speaker, it's not enough that the Ugandan forces, in fact, let me call them by their names. These are forces from Uganda. It is not enough that the Ugandan forces are crossing into Kenya and harassing Kenyan citizens living on the Migingo Island. They have gone ahead, Mr. Speaker, and started arresting Kenyan security forces. Something that is unheard of. That forces from a neighboring country can get into Kenya and not only harass Kenyan citizens, but go ahead and arrest and purport to arrest Kenyan police officers and take them to Ugandan territory, where they hold them in custody for not 1 day, but for more than 2 days, Mr. Speaker. And you hear no comment. No comment from either the Foreign Affairs Ministry or even State House. It's something which should actually concern all of us as a country. Mr. Speaker, if it were in the normal way of doing things, the moment these forces crossed into Kenya and attempted to do what they did, the Kenyan High Commissioner to Uganda would have been recalled immediately for debriefing, followed by a very stern note or warning to the Ugandan High Commissioner in Nairobi to take back to his masters in Nairobi, in Kampala. Mr. Speaker, we must also understand the origin of this problem. The problem we have, and we must say it, is that the NRM leadership in Uganda, the leadership of the NRM in Uganda has had historical problems with members of the Luo community living in Uganda. Now they have exported that problem into Kenya. Our people cannot continue to be punished, by the Ugandan security forces on account of the political differences that the Ugandan leadership has with members of the Luo community in Uganda. We must say here and now that the Kenyan government's duty is to protect every Kenyan citizen regardless of their ethnic affiliation. And the Luo community are no secondary citizens in this country. So the matter of Migingo Island is a matter that must be addressed as a matter of urgency. And I'm happy to speak.
Very well, Honorable Pio. Honorable Maina Commander.
But it's not working. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can see the frustration of my friend here, Buddy, because to me this ought not to be a motion. This ought to be a statement or a petition. But because of the frustration maybe that has been there for all these years, that's why Mheshimiwa Mbadi had decided to bring it as a motion, because at the end of the day, there are no new rules. Man, even to repeat what he said. And the man never opened his mouth there because the president was a real president then and he acted. Mr. Speaker, this Migingo issues has been there. You go to the whole of country now, Migingo has become, in every social place in this country, you find a name Migingo. Even those people who didn't know Migingo, Migingo is all over because Kenyans believe it's part of Kenya. Migingo is part of Kenya. So my question is, why is the government sleeping on the job? Because to me, it is the government that is sleeping on the job. There is no mediation on this. It is just a government declaration. Nobody else. We have been talking about East African integration becoming to how do we integrate, even when some states are still claiming part of what does not belong to them. It is the right time now that we tell the Kenya government, and if need be, because this matter can take time before it is addressed by, that's why I was saying, Mheshimiwa Mbadi, maybe it could have been a petition or a statement so that the minister can appear here by by Thursday and tell us to give us the stand of Kenyan government as far as all these areas are concerned. But nevertheless, I want to support the motion, but the government should wake up and support Kenyan people and its territory. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I beg to support.
Honorable members, before we get to the next speaker, we want to introduce the speaker's gallery, Maragua Gauss from Nyeri constituency, Nyeri town constituency, Nyeri county. Still at the speaker's gallery, Kadhiani Gauss from Kadhiani constituency, Machakos county. And then at the public gallery, we have Gatorori. I hope I got that correctly. Gatorori Primary. That is from Bere North constituency, Ebu County. We have Edenville Gao Secondary School from Embakasi constituency, Nairobi County. And we have Ororunga High School from Narok South constituency, Narok County. And why are you, Honorable Ole Sankok, quite happy when I introduce Ororunga High School? But anyway, Honorable Bui Robert.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. First, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this is a very, very important motion brought in by our leader of the minority party in this House. Clearly, it shows that not only is he helping the minority side here, but he's also representing the people that sent him to Parliament. Because this is one of the responsibilities that we have as members of the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that he's also helping us to bring back dignity to this country, because his motion basically reads that it is protection of Kenyan territories. Mr. Speaker, every nation, every country has a responsibility, of course, to ensure that there is dignity within with the citizens of that country. Every government has to ensure that the boundaries of that country are protected in a proper manner. And it is unfortunate that we as Parliament are sitting here discussing a matter which is clearly, squarely falling in the hands of government officers who know their responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, I've just been thinking about our relationship with our neighbors. We are part of the integration movement in EAC, where we partner with other countries. And it is unfortunate that when you look at the way we relate with some of these countries, it's like some of the countries either are militant towards us, others seem to have some kind of syndrome. I don't know whether it's superiority or inferiority. But Mr. Speaker, if it is not the fishermen who are being harassed in Migingo, it is people who are keeping livestock near the borders, whose livestock are being taken across the borders and arrested. It is traders whose property is being taken and destroyed by friendly partner nations within EAC. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it's come to a time where we as a country need to ask ourselves, is this relationship that we are creating with our neighbors, is it really working for this nation? Mr. Speaker, our constitution is very, very clear, and it is being violated in numerous ways. Because, of course, external threats are one of the things that our constitution clearly talks about. Harassment, because we are hearing that these fishermen are being harassed. Harassment is something which is clearly against our Bill of Rights. Arbitrary arrests, and I think they talked about unfair confinement and mistreatment of people that have been arrested. We have rights in the Bill of Rights on arrested persons. So, Mr. Speaker, our constitution is being violated. We as Parliament, every year, and about a few weeks ago, we were passing a budget. And the budget we pass in this House provides funds for the government to be able to carry out its responsibilities. Our security forces get enough money. We are even now talking about getting them better accommodation. Mr. Speaker, they have enough money, because when we were doing our demonstrations last year, when they were breaking some of us, they had enough, artillery, they had enough ammunition, they had enough, those tankers. It is shocking, Mr. Speaker,
that 2-3 people, you know, in security forces from a neighboring country can walk into our country comfortably, arrest our people, and there's nobody raising a finger. Yet when we say that we are going to go and receive a leader, then we will be broken, we will be subdued. Mr. Speaker, I think I'm smelling some fear in our security forces, which needs to be addressed now. This motion is not urging anymore. I think I'm happy that my leader here has said we are resolving as a House. And what are the resolutions that we are resolving? Mr. Speaker, it says this, that we are resolving that government exercises its powers to protect Kenyans from harassment by external threats and takes adequate measures to ensure that Kenyan territorial integrity is guaranteed and safeguarded, including through the establishment of naval forces to safeguard our lakes. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this is what we are resolving as a House, and this must be done to the letter. I think the implementing committee will have no business worrying about this because even the ministers have heard this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Next screen is Honorable Ogola. Honorable Ogola, member for Ogola Ochanda, member for Bondo.
Thanks a lot, Speaker. I want to support the motion as amended, and I want to quickly hasten that when we are talking about the islands in the Victoria, and we are mentioning Migingo and Sigulu, in between Sigulu and Migingo, there are over 30 islands. And out of all those 30, 18 are in Bondo constituency that I represent. A lot of issues that we are talking about here, the most current information that we are dealing with happened in Bondo. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to bring this to the attention of the House and also to the entire public, that we
think as a citizen, we may soon have migration of people from the lake region into the interior, because when that person that you believe to be protecting you is the one that being arrested by intruders from a neighboring country, then we have all the reasons as a country to be scared. Honorable Speaker, it is pathetic to hear a statement that Migingo belong to Kenya, but the water belong to Uganda. That statement is irrational. Soon then we'll go to the Nilots, that Nilots are being affected and so on. Let us treat this issue as a national issue. Honorable Mbuyu was a bit bitter because of what happened during the demonstration. He belonged to my club. By the way, he became temporarily disabled for some time. But that bitterness should not be brought here. It's a national issue. We should address as it is, as a national issue. And as your chairman, I will call you aside so that I can tell you, bitterness aside, let us address national issues as matters that affect our nation. Honorable Speaker, even when you go to Lake Victoria, 60% of the waters of Lake Victoria originate from. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I do support the motion.
Honorable Martin Owino.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion, and I want to thank my Second, resting within your sovereignty. It means it moves around without any intervention and arrest the people in your territory.
Honorable Martin Owino, what is it, to whom do you want to inform? Honorable?
I wish to inform Honorable Martin.
Honorable Martin, do you want that information? Very well. That is very gracious of you, Honorable Martin. Yes, very well. Honorable Odhiambo, Accord, what is the information?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, actually, when I was moving my amendment, I had alluded to the fact that there was a Busia declaration of 22nd of July 2017. Mr. Speaker, I'd hoped that I would have gotten time to speak, but because I'm told I've moved, I can't speak later. But I think this information is very important even for every other member that is contributing. That the fishermen, when they were tired, deadline for changing all this should be on the 31st of July 2017, which is 1 week from that meeting that they had. And then, to number 8, return all undersized Nile perch accidentally caught into the lake, in bracket, preferably alive. Any boat found with undersized Nile perch will face dire consequences. In bracket, there is a decree on shoot to kill Kenyan fishermen by Uganda. Mr. Speaker, I want to also read for you the other one, number 13, because of time I can't read all of them. Number 12, respect the law. All arrested boats will be crashed and burnt, while the outboard engines will be forfeited to the state of Uganda. Now this is ongoing. They're crashing boats and they're arresting and jailing fishermen on a weekly basis, Mr. Speaker. Number 13, all lake patrols in Lake Victoria, Ugandan waters, are conducted by Ugandan People's Defense Forces and have UPDF clearly marked on their uniforms. If arrested by any other organization and your items are confiscated, note clearly the name of the boat, commander of the team, discreetly to avoid harm, and immediately after they leave you, report to the regional captain of UDPF for investigation and follow up. Caution, do not demand identification as it may be detrimental to you as a fisher. Use discretion. If you do not have the captain's number, liaise with the Homa Bay County BMU. No police, no naval boss. The fishermen have gone to Uganda, coming with the laws and rules which harm fishermen because they have no recourse. And I cannot blame our Homa Bay security forces because they've tried the best. This is not an internal security issue. This is external aggression. And our president needs to deal with the bully. That is the Ugandan president. I call him a name, I might call him a name soon if he does not change.
Very well, very well. I think to that extent, Honorable Martin Oino must be informed. I could see Honorable Martin Oino was nodding. I think the information was helpful. Honorable Martin Oino, you are time that you are being informed will be compensated. You have the floor now.
Thank you. Are internal. When the borders are left porous, that calls for a question. Do we take border protection seriously in this country? So, Mr. Speaker, I want to join the voices of those who have called for an establishment of border protection. If the Border Protection Act needs to be reviewed, so be it, Mr. Speaker, so that we can have our porous borders controlled and well managed. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I tend to think, because this thing have lingered here for a long time, I really tend to think that somebody somewhere is either sleeping on the job or benefiting from this condition. I would like it, the NIS and all investigating arms of this government to find out why should foreign soldiers invade without being noticed and arrest without being arrested. To me, that reads volume when it comes to security matters. We have the best army, GSU, police, and all other security arms, and yet our people are being harassed and their economical gains taken away after long toil in the day. Mr. Speaker, I rest here my case, but I appeal to the President of the Kenya Republic to urgently intervene and remove those forces in Migingo Island to Uganda and immediately deploy our forces to protect our people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Wangari.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to support this motion as amended by Honorable Milia Koth. And I think also that it's one of the best drafted motions given the earlier debate that we had, that we have resolved. We are not urging. And Mr. Speaker, the issue of Migingo, or Mijingo as it's called on the other side, is not a Luo affair. It is about the people of Kenya. It is about not a new issue. In 2008, 2009, Mr. Speaker, we even saw the two ministers from both sides have sitting on the same, and the flag was withdrawn. And even if they say the waters is theirs, Mr. Speaker, why would they not hoist the flag in the waters and not in Migingo? Because Migingo is clearly in the Kenyan nation, Mr. Speaker. And this motion, Mr. Speaker, takes me to what we were discussing earlier. I definitely disagree with the chair of the implementation committee that it is members to actually follow up on implementation. If I read Standing Order 209, Committee on Implementation, Mr. Speaker, they shall scrutinize and all the resolutions of the House, including adopted committee reports, petitions, and undertakings given by the National Executive, and examine whether or not the decisions and undertakings have been implemented, and where implemented, to what extent. And Mr. Speaker, they owe to this House a report on the progress of all the motions that have been given to them, have been passed overwhelmingly by this House. The issue of scrutinizing whether these motions are implementable is at the table office, is at the House Business Committee. The role of implementation committee, Mr. Speaker, is to actually ensure that this is done. And Part 3 of Standing Order 209, Mr. Speaker, the committee may propose to the House sanctions against any cabinet secretary who fails to report to the relevant select committee on implementation status without justifiable reasons. When the chairman says that as members we have to follow up, then, Mr. Speaker, I doubt on the capacity of the committee to actually deliver to this House. We actually want to see the Committee of Implementation telling us what has been done, give a report to this committee, update us on how many have been delivered, to what extent, and tell us why the others are delaying. Mr. Speaker, that will be taking responsibility, and I challenge the committee and the leadership to actually do that, to ensure this backlog. It has come all the way from the 11th Parliament. We are told things that had been passed then have not been implemented. Then we are speaking in vain, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that we can get the committee give us proper updates. And I hope that this resolution will be a part of their very important deliberation. And now, Mr. Speaker, because we are living the handshake time, we have seen the Honorable Raila Odinga being received very well in India and, taking a message from the president. We are hoping that he can also lead in this deliberation because of his good relations as the envoy, now representing the government, that we can see the resolutions, Mr. Speaker, of ensuring that Migingo is totally safe and the people living there are safe, and the issue of aggressions that we have been seeing from Uganda are dealt with once and for all. I support, Mr. Speaker.
Before I give to Honorable Oduo Adhiambo, let me begin here.
His next trip, I think he should go to and meet Honorable His Excellency Yoweri Museveni and take the message of this House. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at Article 238, 239, 241, the National Security Council and the Kenya Defense Forces have an obligation under the supreme law to defend the territorial integrity, whether it is land, air, or water, for the benefit of the people of Kenya. And, Mr. Speaker, the member for Kikuyu is not in Kikuyu constituency. He can sit next to the minority leader, his friend, my minority whip, but he must come with some decorum that the House is in session and debating a very serious matter. And, Mr. Speaker, so the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Kenya Defense Forces, Ministry of Defense, we have been told of a story of surveys being done, negotiations being done. There's a gentleman who is in charge of Kenyan international borders. In the 10th Parliament, in the 11th Parliament, money was allocated by this House to do that exercise. Mr. Speaker, nothing has been forthcoming. And I think it's time that our Kenyan Defense Forces and the National Security Council use the provisions of the Constitution to defend our people. Mr. Speaker, the other interest I have, and I want to make it very clear, the other interest I have is that the people who are doing business along the lake, the fishermen, are from the Somali community. You know, there are small people here who are chasing Somalis. Somalis are the main guys, and I'm sure Honorable Mido Odhiambo will agree with me. Yes, even in Honorable Bandi. So we do every business and any business under the sun, as long as that business is legal. So if you think you can chase us around Isli here, you have to find some others in Suba. They are in Remba Island fishing. They are the owners of the cold rooms. They are the ones who are doing business with the fishermen who go at night. If you go to Lamu, you'll find them. If you want to find camel rearing in Laikipia, you'll find them. So we are ready to work with all Kenyans. But, can you protect me from the former Kanu Hawk?
You are completely protected, Majority Leader.
The Speaker, you know, there are very few people who have remained in this house who have worked with President Boy. And, and Koyo is a serious man. I respect him. He represents that class. So when he speaks, I have to be very careful. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we have played politics with the issue of Migingo for far too long. I have been in this house in the 10th Parliament, in the 11th Parliament, now in the 12th Parliament. The way we are dealing with all other borders, the borders we have with South Sudan, the borders we have with Somalia, we are with Somalia currently at the International Court on the Indian Ocean. I think this House and this government must walk the talk and make sure that the issue of Migingo, Mr. Speaker, it is inhuman, it's unacceptable that every 3 months we hear Kenyans have been arrested on that island. We hear a foreign flag has been hoisted there. We hear, so we can't do firefighting. Any government worth its salt, Mr. Speaker, must protect the interests of its citizens and must protect the territorial integrity in terms of land, water, sea of that nation. And I am sure the CDF, the Kenyan Defense Forces Commander, our President, the Ministry for Interior, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, all of them together, and this House is ready to allocate enough resources. That small island, it's not a big island, but when you look at the map of Kenya, that island is part of Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, there are people who live there, and they elected leaders to this House, Mr. Speaker, unless somebody is telling me that they don't vote. They elect leaders in this House. And we must make sure that with this story of them being arrested, this story of saying Mugingo is not part of Kenya, this story must come to an end, and we must find a long-lasting solution. So Speaker, the member for game. The member for game cannot turn this place into a game constituency. You know, that constituency was represented by a very powerful man. And you have many years to put yourself in his shoes. So you must learn, you know. When Jacoya used to speak, the house used to be quiet. The people of game are putting you on a scale, my friend. Yeah, they're asking whether you have reached where Jacoya was. So more than any other member, Mr. Speaker, he's supposed to listen and learn and pray to God that one day he will fit into the shoes.
What is it, member for game? What is it, member for game?
Yes, no,
Mr. Speaker, sir, I think the majority leader is in order to insinuate that in his estimation, with his barometer of Northeastern, that I'm not capable of running game. I think that is a wrong insinuation for an important member who has the intellectual acumen which is comparable to none in Northeastern. Thank you.
I want to imagine Majority Leader did not say or insinuate what you are saying. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, there are certain constituencies in this House that if you are from those constituencies, you will be put on a benchmark. If you are from Langata, that is where the constituency of former Prime Minister, if you are from the constituency of the President, Gatundu South, Eldoret North, Mwingi North, you know, Murodikiri is a small constituency. You know, Odaya, you know, Chapalungu of Isaac Ruto, you know, Boni Khalwale of Kolomani, Mutula Kilonzo Senior. So it's not. Those are constituencies that were represented. People in this House, when they game, of course, when I leave Garissa Township, when they speak, Honorable Bandi's constituency, when they speak, whoever takes their seat must make sure that he doesn't lower. So you don't come to the House, Mr. Speaker, and Honorable Miri Odhiambo, when she retires...
Order, Majority. What is it, Honorable Miri Odhiambo?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whereas I agree with the Majority Leader that there are constituencies that have, in quote, Wazito, that when you go, you must leave that level. But is it in order to imply that there are no women of that caliber? You must also say where Martha Karua they came from. You must also say the constituency where Charity Ngilu came from. There are women who are of power. And when I finally exit, you must be of the same weight as Amilo Gesagesa.
Majority Leader, if you put it to yourself to name names, then you must be conclusive.
You know, Mr. Speaker, the list was long. But the problem with the women leaders in this country, they are suspicious. They are suspicious. They think we are not going to mention, of course, Mother Karua, among others, etc. Mr. Speaker, so Mr. Speaker, member for Game, Elisha is a very good friend of mine. But I tell him always that you must pray to God that you reach the benchmark set by my very good friend. And the people of Game are watching you. I'm only saying, people of Game are watching you. So always, you are not like any other members. But Mr. Speaker, coming back to the debate, I think the leader of minority has brought a very, very important debate. And further, I think the Committee on Defense and Foreign Relations and the one for regional integration should move further and even ask the Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Interior to come and brief the status of Migingo as of today in terms of our territorial integrity. And then file and table a report for this House to discuss and then use that report if we are forced to allocate more resources. And Mr. Speaker, finally, I really want the members of parliament from that region to protect my community. They are under siege, and they're under siege for working very hard. They have not committed another crime. They go to the lake, they live well with the people of Nyanza, they have cold rooms, they want to establish small fish factories. And when you come to Rift Valley, they are in business, they run petrol stations, they run hotels. You go to Central, they are the same. And Mr. Speaker, you know we come from the desert. We will not go back to that desert. So if somebody thinks by intimidating this community, you will take them back to Northeastern, you have many years to live with us. We will remain. The good thing, Mr. Speaker, people say we have taken the CPD. We don't do business of alcohol. We don't open bars. We don't do butcheries. We only run hotels, restaurants that provide very good, nutritious food and that gives good price. So I really want to thank Honorable Millie, Honorable Bandi, all the members of parliament who come from along the lake. We have done good business with you. We will stand with you. The fish and the island Migingo belongs to Kenya. I want to go on record. If you think it doesn't belong to Kenya, then you have not seen the map of Kenya. Migingo belongs to Kenya and is not in order. Not a foreign country.
I'm sure you're concluding.
But I think the Minister for Foreign Affairs, who we have passed this House and whose budget we have passed, is under obligation to go and resolve the matter of Migingo once and for all. We don't want to hear people being arrested by Ugandans. Yes. If our people have to be arrested, they should be arrested by Kenyans. Kenyan police under the leadership of Boynet. They are not under the command of the Commissioner of Police of Uganda. Here to go to Kampala. So respect our people, respect our territorial integrity. We will respect you within the confines of the East Africa community, which we are the big brother. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Yes, Honorable Juliet, I know you take precedent, but before then, I must remain faithful to the slot I had given to Honorable Oduol Adiabo.
Opportunity, and thank you, the whip, for allowing me also to take the opportunity as given by the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to support this motion and want to thank Minority Leader Honorable Mbadi for bringing this motion. Mr. Speaker, as I start, I would like us to remember that in life you do not get what you deserve, you get what you pursue. And one of the reasons why when we form countries, we declare sovereignty, we come up with a constitution. On June 12, 2018, we could see from the nation, Ugandan soldiers rough up, detain Kenyan police in Lake Victoria. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, as we look at this matter, we want to remember that the integrity of borders and the ability of a state to broadcast its authority is one of the most important signals of state sovereignty. And it is therefore of great concern that they are under the cover and come up with the commitments that cannot really protect them. And so, Mr. Speaker, as we look at this motion and as I support it, I really want to also reiterate that there are national and local issues that are concerned here. And I want to agree with the honorable members who have spoken before me that we must all unite, because it is not morally or nationally correct to have issues that touch on borders only being left to county administration police or county security organs. Mr. Speaker, Article 239 of our Constitution clearly indicates that the national security organs are the Kenya Defense Forces, the National Intelligence Service, and the National Police Service. And Mr. Speaker, we'll see that whereas Kenya sends fishermen that tend to be the ones who are casualties, but we all know that the kind of lifestyle and the kinds of challenges and problems that we have around areas where we have fishermen working on their livelihood, when they are arrested, such as was the case, and when they are harassed, it even leads to cases where we have a lot of instability in the home, we have women and children suffering, and we have a context which really is not good. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, I would like to say that it is extremely important that since we as a House have resolved that we will take action on this, we rise to protect the situation of exploitation, the unfortunate and demeaning manner in which our citizens have been treated. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Honorable Junet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this motion. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important and timely motion, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my leader, the minority leader, and the party sponsoring this motion, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this issue of Migingo has been an issue in this country for many, many years. Mr. Speaker, people might see that this is a small place. It doesn't matter whether it is in Uganda, whether it is in Kenya. But Mr. Speaker, this is an indication of abdication of responsibility by the government to protect its territories, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you for sure, if this piece of rock was in some part of this country that I know, this country will have gone to war by now, Mr. Speaker. If this rock was in Mount Kenya or in the Rift Valley, where the president and the deputy president come from, they will have gone to war by now, Mr. Speaker, to claim this piece of.
Should we now start, you know, this ethnic connotation are the ones that are dividing this country. Honorable Speaker, please, he's out of order.
Very well. Honorable Sankok, I thought Honorable Junet talked about Central and Rift Valley. Honorable Junet.
Mr. Speaker, I talked about regions. I didn't talk about communities. But you know, when you take care of animals and cattle, you always think of communities because it's communities are still animals from another community, Mr. Speaker. So that is still in Kajiado, is not in Parliament.
Proceed, Honorable.
So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I talked about if this Migingo was in certain region, then we will have had kind of war with Uganda by now, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the way the government has neglected the fishing industry, Mr. Speaker, in that region where we represent, Mr. Speaker, in terms of policy, Mr. Speaker, instead of the government focusing on how to revive the fishing industry at the lake, so that the lake can have enough fish that can satisfy this market, Mr. Speaker, what do? They start telling people to have fish ponds in Nyeri, in Nakuru, in Kakamega, places where there are no lakes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that piece of rock you are seeing as Migingo, Mr. Speaker, is so important to the fishing community that without that rock, there will be no fishing, Mr. Speaker, in that lake. I traveled during the campaigns, Mr. Speaker, last elections with Honorable Millie to our constituencies. We flew to, I think, 4 or 5 and takes serious security of that area. Mr. You know when I'm talking like that, because I know what I'm talking about and I come from there.
Very well. I'm sure Honorable Member for Junet, you've made your point. Next on my screen is Honorable Huru for order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to support this very important motion. And I would like to urge all the members that this is not a Luo affair, it's not a Suba affair, it's a Kenyan affair. We are really touched as leaders, as members of National Assembly. If anywhere in this republic, if any part of Kenya, we have citizens whose lives and livelihood are not protected, it should be a matter of concern to all of us. It is very unfortunate that this issue of Migingo has taken very long for it to be resolved. I think Luo community being in opposition should not be a reason for the government of Kenya, the current one and the previous ones, not to protect the lives of fishermen in Lake Victoria and specifically in Migingo. I think if we look, and when I read that report, actually one of the main things was that a joint technical committee was formed to look at the boundary issue, and because the counterparts from the other side knew that definitely if that technical team was allowed to do its work, the outcome will definitely be that the highland will belong to Kenya, they pulled out on the pretext that they needed to go back to Kampala and consult their seniors. I think we need to appreciate that the boundaries of all the African countries, I think when the Organization of African Unity met sometime in 1964 in Cairo, they agreed that they will abide by the boundaries as at the time each state attained its independence. And looking at the ordinance, the colonial ordinance, the Kenya Colony and the Protectorate Order of 1926, which actually delineated. He is the Commander-in-Chief of Armed Forces. Our neighbors have deployed not police, but a special unit of Ugandan Defense Forces to Migingo to harass our fishermen. I think the starting point, at the end of this debate on this particular motion, what we should urge or resolve the government to do is to deploy actually the specialized unit of our Kenya Defense Forces which deals with marine issues so that we can equalize the power in the Lake Victoria, so that from then, our neighbors should stop to take us for granted. I think when the policemen, or actually the military of a neighboring country, arrest our law enforcement officers, this is not something that we should take as a country lying down. I think as a country, we love peace, and that has been taken for granted by our neighbors. As a country, I think we uphold the provisions of UN Charter. We respect what was resolved by Organization of African Unity and AU. We also actually are bound by the spirit of East African cooperation. I think at this point in time, we should be even talking of borderless East Africa, a properly integrated East Africa, and not East Africa where a neighboring country is harassing our people, and and then our people, because of lack of protection, are forced to go into some kind of, funny MOU, which I think our members shared with us, which is illegal, where, their boats are confiscated, they are destroyed. I think this is economic sabotage. And therefore, as I stop, because my time is out, I would like us to very strongly resolve that our government, specifically the Commander-in-Chief of Armed Forces, deploy the army there so that our people can be protected. And then from there, probably the other side will be forced to come to a negotiating table.
Very well. Shall we have next is Honorable Okwome Adipo. And members, if you are gracious enough and took slightly less, this is not binding to you. But if you are gracious enough, within the time we will have more members speak to this, because I can tell quite a bit of interest on this particular motion. If you could be graciously guided by that, Honorable, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. Now, this issue is extremely important, especially for me, because in a few days' time, on 6th of this month, we are burying a young man who was fishing in Migingo and was hacked to death by the Ugandan army, by the Ugandan people. So mine is not really theoretical. It is practical. It is something for which I would even invited the members of Bunge here to go and help in burying the dead, so this person dead, so that we can drive the point home. Mr. Speaker, sir, our people in Migingo are there doing their business, but they live with the Ugandan army there, who dictate what they are doing, who dictate the food they are going to eat, who dictate how they are going to fish in the lake. I appeal strongly to our government to come to the aid of our people because they are dying. I salute our minority leader for having brought this very important motion so that we can discuss it and ask our leaders to take action, because it is necessary for action to be taken now. I'm aware that for a number of times, the issue has come to this house, to this honorable house. People discuss, they pass motions, they agree on what is to be done, and the matter ends there. Till when are we going to discuss without action following? If there is an implementation committee, they should follow up and see that whatever is decided in this house is respected and get implemented. Mr. Speaker, I will be a happy man if this motion today ends this issue so that we can say we are part of Kenya. Kenya cannot just have its people being harassed, killed, as we see. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll obey what you said and end there.
Is very important. And I want to support the sentiments made by Honorable Wandai that this country needs to get serious on matters of territorial integrity. Mr. Speaker, this country is losing its statehood because for our country to be declared a state, it must comply with 4 main issues. 1, with Somali over a dispute of an area within the Indian Ocean. We have an issue with the Southern Sudan and Ethiopia over the Elemi Triangle. This issue remains unresolved to date. And even Tanzania, Mr. Speaker, the other day we heard that our cows were taken away by the Tanzanian government and sold. And this country never took any serious steps. Right now, Mr. Speaker, the Tanzanian government has put $2 million into the project of putting beacons in the Kenya-Tanzania boundary. And yet the Kenyan government has put no budget on it. We are not serious with protecting our boundaries. And the presidents of those other countries can sit down and resolve. We also need to look at our foreign policy.
John Bandi, and as amended by Honorable Millie Odhiambo. And Mr. Speaker, I want to start by saying that this issue is an urgent matter. In fact, it was an urgent matter very many years ago. And I stand here reminiscing on times as we were growing up, when we were told of great legends, of leaders who would stand on podiums and platforms and swear that not even a single inch of this country would be annexed. It is in this spirit that I look at the matter of Migingo and see it not only as an issue of Migingo on its own. It's actually
what seems to be happening right now, which is now over 20 years. I think Migingo issue has spanned over 15 to 20 years. Nothing has happened, and Kenya looks so weak before the world that we are not able to sort out the problems that is affecting Migingo and other islands around Lake Victoria. My question is to various ministries and various bodies that should look after the East African community. What is the role of the Ministry of Defense? It should come out strong to defend our country, to defend the people of Migingo, and to defend Lake Victoria. What is the role of East African Parliament? I think that no motion has ever arisen in that parliament to discuss the issue of Migingo. It's East African. This is an issue that touches East Africa. What is the role of the parliament, Elea? That again is not coming out. What's the role of foreign affairs? They are responsible for all this, and they must bring peace, security to our nation, and to ensure that the interests of Kenyans are addressed. Yet we are seeing that nobody is showing any interest. I want to conclude by saying that time is gone for a country to occupy another country. If there's such a dream of one country trying to do that, I think it's high time that the Kenya government rises up to demonstrate that we are equally strong and that we can defend our nation. Otherwise, you start with one step and we shall have many steps. These enemies of Kenya will occupy the entire Kenya if we cannot handle Migingo Island alone, because we are looking so weak before them, and they are bullying us because they know that they are stronger than us. They are bullying us and killing our women. They are actually raping little girls on the lake. They are doing crazy things that should never happen, and yet you are watching helplessly. I demand and I request, I demand that the military, Kenyan military, should take charge and move on very, very fast. That is what I have for today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity.
Honorable Wanga Nyasuna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think the principle of respect for territorial integrity has been canvassed, And what I'd like to say, Mr. Speaker, is Homa Bay County, which I represent, has over 145 fishing beaches. And Mr. Speaker, the people along these beaches every morning wake up and wonder whether they are truly Kenyans or they belong to another country because of
so that we can be able to build a nation together, so that in that short period, this can be an industrialized nation. So, Mr. Speaker, basically, that just underscores the importance of education in any country. And Mr. Speaker, even as a parent, I understand that the best thing you can give to your children is not even wealth, you know, in the form of property or money. It is actually education. Because if you take Mr. Speaker, Article 29 talks about the right to freedom and security. Mr. Speaker, Article 40 talks about protection of right to property. Article 43 talks about economic and social rights. And one of those rights in Part F is actually the right to education. Mr. Speaker, on Article 53, which talks about children's rights, we say that every child has a right to B, free and compulsory basic education, and D, to be protected from all forms of violence. Mr. Speaker, my motion intends to ask this House to support in ensuring that we protect our educational institutions, because it is only when we have a vibrant and conducive environment that education of our children and of the nation can actually be enhanced. And Mr. Speaker, Parliament must therefore use its authority to ensure that it protects education in this country. Mr. Speaker, our educational institutions, our learners, workers in those institutions are under attack. Last night, I watched news in one of the channels, and they talked about Ngia girls, where the girls have just gone home for an indefinite period of time because of violence in the school. They also mentioned a school in Kisumu, a girls' school in Kisumu, where girls have also recently been sent home. That is only in one news show. They talked about Ngara girls, where a girl was taken to school, delivered to the teacher on duty, immediately after midterm, 8 days later, we don't know where that girl is. Also, there is this report about Chelby boys in Marsabit, where 6 teachers were attacked by the students, and actually one is in critical condition. Mr. Speaker, basically, we have an issue, a major issue. In fact, that station that I watched last night had this question for Kenyans. What is driving student unrest in girls' schools in Kenya? And I wanted to just modify and say, what is driving students' unrest in schools in Kenya? Mr. Speaker, the magnitude of these cases is more than what we had or I had last night in the news. We are talking about situations of student unrest in Kenya, where we have seen the burning to death of 8 girls in Asumbi Girls Boarding in 2012. 19 girls perished in St. Kizito Secondary School in Meru in 1991. 25 students died in Bombolulu Girls Mombasa in 19. Is 2016. And Mr. Speaker, they draw a very, very nasty picture about this country. They show a very, very bad picture of how badly our schools are being burnt, how many people are being injured, how many lives are being lost, and it is incredible. Mr. Speaker, even the statistics that we have from the ministry clearly are not conclusive, because even when I look at 2016, I was still representing my constituency. I know that there are schools that had issues of arson that have not been reported here, because most of the times when the principals report these cases, it is seemed that the principals have failed. So therefore they shy away. And if there is no major injury or death, then most of the times they will be just swept under the carpet. So Mr. Speaker, it is a major problem that we face as a country. Mr. Speaker, what therefore is our solution? And this is what I propose for this House. I heard the CS of Education also mentioning it. This motion, I tried to bring it last Parliament, that we install security surveillance in all our institutions of learning. Mr. Speaker, if you put CCTV cameras in strategic places within the schools, then it means that those people that will be planning these arson attacks, that will be planning to attack teachers, that will be planning to destroy property, will basically be scared because they will know that they can be seen. And Mr. Speaker, all cameras are not those that are visible. I think when we talk about CCTV surveillance, we have visible cameras. We could also go into the point of having some hidden cameras in strategic places where it is not their privacy that is being deprived, but we are just watching to ensure that if anyone attempts to destroy or plan something that will destroy property or hurt Kenyans, then that person will be taken, will basically be caught. So basically by doing this, what we shall be doing, Mr. Speaker, is we shall be discouraging these criminals. And I call them criminals because sometimes we want to call them students, but when a child can actually light a fire in a dorm that kills 68 of their colleagues, that is literally a criminal, Mr. Speaker. That is not somebody we can call someone's child. That is not somebody we can call a student, because that is somebody who has crossed, you know, the line. Mr. Speaker, we are also proposing that we have regular and mandatory checks to ensure that these cameras are working. Mr. Speaker, we all know that in this country many times we do agree and we have good ideas. Like I saw a report on Kenya Power. There are transformers. The government wants to install power all over the country, and suddenly there are so many transformers, and so many of them are actually faulty. So we are saying that not only should we have these installed, but they should also be checked to ensure that they are proper and they are working all the time. So that is one of the second thing we are proposing. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, we are proposing that we have a profile of the alleged perpetrators of these acts, a register which is kept by the minister, so that we can know who are those people that have been involved in these cases of arson. Mr. Speaker, what happens every time in second term when there are these cases, you notice that they actually start escalating. And the reason they escalate is simply because those perpetrators of these acts, when the school burns down and they are sent home, they don't go back because they know they are capable. So they convince their parents and they seek transfer to other schools. When they transfer to other schools, they become the heroes because they'll be telling the others what they managed to do in another school. And the second school burns, a third school burns, a fourth school burns. The next thing we're asking, what's happening to the country? Why are all our schools burning? If we can block the transfer of the perpetrators, then obviously it means that we will not be able to have this kind of vice going into other schools. And so we want to ensure that we have strict transfer procedures which are restricted to those people who their record is cleared. Mr. Speaker, that does not mean that a child cannot transfer from one school to the other. It just means that if this register is available, even when a school accepts that child to be part of their student population, they will be taking care to ensure that this child is closely monitored, because only by monitoring will we be able to stop the continuation of these negative vices in this country. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know that this is a matter that is of grave concern to a lot of our people, and I want to ask that I beg to move, and I want to call upon a member who also has the interest of our children and education at heart to second the motion, and that is the Honorable Wilson Sosion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Sosion.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to second this motion. And it's coming at the right time when this country is at the crossroads in terms of security of our learning institutions. Hardly a day passes without a report of incidences bordering on insecurity in our schools, particularly in our boarding schools. And I want to thank Honorable Mbui for bringing this motion. There are all indicators that there are security lapses in our inevitable for any nation. And Kenya, with its own great capacity to do a lot of work in terms of ICT and the investment that it has in this area, then it is inevitable that at this age, era, and time, we must install and invest in security surveillance equipment in schools. We have noted quite a number of arson, and it has been completely impossible to nab the culprits. And schools management have been unable to account for this, not even to bring any of the culprits to books. In recent times, in the last couple of days, we've had issues of bordering on rape of our girls in the dormitories. And of course, there are many narratives around this. It's difficult to account. And it is completely impossible for principals and teachers to take action. And teachers have remained victims at the end of the process in situations where they cannot account. And truly, they lack capacity to do so. A case of Moi Nairobi girls, which has been mentioned, there are CCTVs, cameras installed, but they're not functioning. And it is difficult to account for exactly what happened in that night, whether these narratives are true, real, imagined, or even activities of wayward students during the night or to frame up the administration. Mr. Speaker, this motion is...
What is it, Honorable Miri Odhiambo? What is your point of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to interrupt our good child protectionist, but I thought I just wanted to say from a victim protection perspective that it is actually not right to cast.
Looks like a point of information, but Honorable Association looked like
I truly respect Honorable Millie Odhiambo's concerns, and I subscribe to the same. But what we are talking about here, the big question we can account. Mr. Speaker, with installation of CCTV cameras and CCTV cameras that are well managed, CCTV cameras of good quality, and CCTV cameras that it is time all schools in this country installed, not only boarding schools. We need accountability everywhere, not only schools, even other learning institutions like the universities.
Very well, your time is up, but you give him 10 seconds to say he seconds because he is seconding.
Mr. Speaker, to conclude, even in examination rooms where we talk of examinations cheating, it is possible to monitor and nap any form of activity in examination rooms by installing CCTVs in all examination rooms. That is the only way we can end examination cheating and insecurity. I support this motion. Thank you.
You second.
I second this motion. Thank you.
Very well, honorable members, I will propose a question, which is that aware of the increased cases of insecurity in schools, including regrettable cases of defilement and rape that have been reported in various schools, with the most recent case being reported in Moi Girls School, Nairobi, where a student was raped. Further aware that incidences of building in public secondary